All right, guys. Good evening. Welcome to By the Horns, episode 3. We're here with Gideon Joubert. Gideon is him and I go back a couple of years. He's one of the big main voices for the freedom movement in South Africa. If you know anything about firearms in South Africa, you've definitely heard his name before. He's been like I said, an ardent voice for freedom, and not so recently, like he's been an undercover Bitcoiner for a while. So we thought we'd get him on the show and have a chat to him.
Not so undercover anymore, but
yeah, sorry, blew you off sec there. But yeah, Gideon, can you tell us a bit about yourself?
I'll keep it brief. So qualification-wise, I used to fly for Mango. I was a captain on the 737-800 until lockdown hit. And then the company stopped paying us. And then I got into a whole bunch of very ugly, very public fights with management, and I left before, I think more for my own sanity than anything else. It was a very negative work environment. And as you could have seen from the weekend's press, things haven't improved. So we're going to talk about the financials of SOE later on tonight. We might even start with it. But apart from flying airplanes, I'm also a accredited firearm instructor. I also have an honors degree in economics, and there's a whole bunch of other nonsense that I do that I completely forget about. And I act like I know how to write. So that's it.
I think you being a bit, not giving yourself enough credit there. I read a lot of your work. You're clearly a man who's written a lot. And basically the gun lobby in South Africa, right?
Well, I try to do my bit because I think Firearms Policy Coalition summed it up best on Twitter today. They said, it's cool to be a gun person, but we need more freedom people. So freedom people include the concept of being a gun person. And this is the cool thing about everything we're going to talk about tonight. It's about personal resilience. It's about private money. It's about state-proofing yourself, your family, your community, and zooming out from there. And it's about freedom.
Absolutely,
straight up,
man. And that segues well into the first point I want to bring up here. So self-sovereignty. This is a topic we spoke to Ramon about day before yesterday. And this self-sovereignty starts with taking personal responsibility. Like, you can't be sovereign unless you take responsibility for yourself. And people seem to, in the 2020s, have forgotten that the government's not your dad. Like, you need to rely on yourself, and relying on government is a bad idea. What do you think people can do to start state-proofing themselves?
There's so much they can do, and it's actually not that complicated a topic. And it starts with a paradigm shift and attitude change at the very beginning. And it's exactly what you said. Stop seeing the government as your caretaker or a provider for you. I mean, for goodness sake, you are a provider for government. Without your productivity, without your knowledge, without your inputs, without everything you're doing, government would not have the money to expropriate from you on a monthly or annual basis in order to run the overinflated shit show that it is. So the relationship of need or dependence is not from them to you, or rather it's from you to them. They are dependent on you. But as you said, like, it seems that we've forgotten about this. You need to take ownership over the factors that you can control, and you need to adapt to and mitigate against those that you cannot control. That's beyond your control. So that's a simple summary of where to start. It starts with you, your attitude, your mindset.
When you're looking at America and other countries, do you think people are leaning towards more government control? Do you think they just don't know that they're doing that and they're moving towards that?
America is very almost bipolar in that regard for me, because about half the country seem to want extreme amount of statist intervention, state control, government interference in all aspects of private and economic life. Whereas the other half of the country are almost to the point of anarchy, as in total self-sufficiency, no government required, which I suppose is a good balance. But if you look at the rest of the Anglosphere world, if you talk about Canada, Australia, New Zealand being a particularly horrible example of it, it's not creeping tyranny and state control anymore. It's sprinting in those regards. And the Irish have that problem. The Scots have that problem. The English. It's a mess, and Europe isn't looking any prettier, except, of course, when you get to the Eastern Bloc nations like the Polish and the Czechs and the Austrians. They seem to have a a better relationship with the concept of individual liberty than their immediate neighbors, like the Germans, the French, and the Italians.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, it's obviously it's all well and good saying you need to start taking responsibility. Where do these things start? Like, do you start in the financial realm? Do you start in like the personal safety realm? Like, what's the best place to start taking sovereignty back?
I think we need to start in several aspects simultaneously. I mean, obviously, this is a Bitcoin show, so talking private money and why private money is such a crucial fundamental block in this process is part of it, because Bitcoin seems intimidating, I think, to people who know nothing of it, but it is not that complicated or complex a concept to explain nor to understand. There's no black magic happening behind the scenes. It's as close as a natural resource in digital form as we can get. It's essentially digital gold. But as opposed to being mined via a deep shaft type operation somewhere on the east or west rand, it is done by computing power. That the work that's being done is cryptographic problems that are being solved in order to link these blockchains or these blocks in a chain of information together that cannot be interfered with, because that's the way the entire thing is designed, and that nobody controls it. So it's a beautiful thing. And as you demonstrated to me last week, a major issue with Bitcoin was it was impractical to make payments with, because it was a bit complicated and it took time. That's been solved. My biggest criticism against Bitcoin, I was never anti-Bitcoin. I was hugely skeptical of it. Now, that was my research paper, what I wrote in 2016, 2017, was quite skeptical about it surviving its own success. Because I was thinking, we are going to probably have a tulip problem where the bubble's going to happen. What changed my entire outlook on it was the bubble happened, and Bitcoin lived and it thrived in the aftermath of the pop. And that just kind of said to me, okay, this is clear. This is bigger than just a speculative commodity. This is something with real potential value and use. Get in on this.
So for you, what is the biggest draw then? Is it the fact that you can buy into something that gives you financial freedom? Not in the sense of like you money for the rest of your life, but your financial freedom in the sense that no one can take it away from you, no one can cut your access to it.
Well, that's a big part of it, is that no one can steal it from me. I mean, sure, if you leave it on an exchange, it can be raided. If you are lackadaisical with your security measures, you may end up paying the price for being negligent with it. But those are, these are big boy rules and big girl rules for the big world. One should take that type of ownership over something that, I mean, you're not going to buy a Krugerrand and leave it lying on your car seat in the parking lot of the Macro, for God's sake. I mean, people need to get their minds away from, it's a physical safe. It's like, yes, download, in inverted commas, your Bitcoin off the internet and lock it in a safe and a hard wallet. Yes, do all these good things, but understand what you're dealing with. The other part that I think is relevant right now, we talked about this also offline. South Africa has printed approximately 30% of its M1, of its money supply, existing money supply, since the 1st of Jan last year. The only reason the Rand hasn't tanked spectacularly against all other currencies in the world is because most major central banks are doing exactly the same thing. The Canadians have printed over 30%. The Swiss, the austere, supposed amazing Swiss, have opened the printing presses right up, and the Americans have printed 150% of their M1. So
I think the Canadians have done 300%. Brandon, correct me if I'm wrong. Canadians have done the most.
Yeah, I think it was 300 to maybe 400%.
Yeah, 400%.
But you're right, because it's it's universal. All the forex has remained consistent, but then you've seen commodities and other asset classes go through the roof. So that's what you're seeing.
The only reason the JSE has gone up in the last 5 years is because the government printed so much money. Because all that money's got to flow somewhere, and it just flows into asset markets, right?
But I mean, see what Magnus Haystack is now saying, like, you can't get bank lending anymore.
Yeah.
Like it's fallen through the floor. So a lot of this cash that's been printed has probably ended up in with banks, and they're not lending it.
Yeah.
So it's very close to. It might not be entirely similar to the subprime mortgage crisis, where you just had this lack of bank liquidity because of bank hoarding of it, but none of this bodes well. And the only way you can really get away from being nailed by the government controlling money, because central banks aren't independent. I don't care what people say. Like the South African Reserve Bank is as independent as our judiciary, which is basically not.
Yeah.
It's just a front.
Yeah.
Private money is crucial to your survival going into this brave new post-pandemic world.
But I think that's something we want to hammer on, and maybe it's something Brandon and I talk about a lot in isolation, is just the Bitcoin aspect. But there's so much more to self-sovereignty than just your money. There's the security aspect and the community aspect is as important, right? Because you can have all the Bitcoin in the world, but be as useful with a firearm as Vitalik Buterin. So you're gonna have some problems, So how do you start taking sovereignty back in that realm, like in the personal security realm and in the community building realm?
So the communities are really just chains of individuals that come together pursuing a common purpose. And I think we are seeing communities finding themselves closer together now than maybe prior, because survival mode is real right now.
Yep.
And personal security and personal safety is, you are always, it's something I always tell people, you are always the first responder to your personal emergency. Nobody else is going to be on that particular scene before you, because you are there already. And you need the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude, or as we'd rather say, the mindset, the training, and the equipment, in order to effectively be that first responder, or to be the most effective first responder as possible, given your skill set and knowledge base. And mindset always comes first. Having a combative mindset, which is solutions orientated and proactive, is first and foremost your most powerful weapon, because you can be a highly skilled firearm user or even fighter, and you can have an incredible amount of knowledge, and you can have the best equipment in the world. If you do not have the willpower or desire or understanding to want to use that when absolutely necessary, and do what needs to be done, then you are not going to be particularly effective. So developing the right mindset takes a bit of time, but it's something that one can practice every day and apply it to all aspects of your daily life. Then understand how to defend yourself, understand how to secure your home against intruders, understand basic security concepts. And if you don't understand them, get a consultant. I will consult for you. I'm allowed to now do that. I'm legally registered to do security consulting. But there's so many free resources that you can find on the internet that are good, that can, give you a place to start already, where you can start tonight or tomorrow, and don't delay on this. Come do your firearm proficiency training, understand how guns work, understand the legalities behind it, become legally armed so that you can project that force. You've started that journey yourself, Ricky, so congrats. That's a big step. And then building community is really a sense of someone needs to take charge. And if no one's taking charge in your community, guess what? It might have to be you. And it starts with something as simple as forming a neighborhood watch WhatsApp, or, well, we don't like WhatsApp anymore, but Signal or Telegram group, do it right.
Yeah.
And having a set purpose for that, and getting people involved, and explaining to them that free riders, there's no such thing as a free ride. If you don't want to be involved in that section of the community, there'll be something else for you to do, or we will find you another tasks. And AfriForum has been great at doing this. There have been a whole stack of non-profit, non-governmental organizations that have, in their own special way, been building this state-proof individual and community resilience, taking people off grid, exploring the options of hydroponics. It's something simple as growing a veggie garden makes you more independent already. All these things that are crazy prepper talk 2 years ago are now mainstream concerns.
Yeah. I think it's important for people to understand the reality, and maybe you shed some light on this. Like, what is the reality of the security situation in South Africa in terms of the police, in terms of like the actual security that they are providing to you? Because people seem to live in a bubble, thinking that they are being protected and there's things in place to look after you.
Well, it's that's the fact that there's any sort of effective policing in South Africa is a myth on par with Tokolosis and things like that. The security situation has steadily but drastically deteriorated year upon year since 2011, where our murder rate has increased every single year on year since then. The police has faced budget cuts, but at the same time, look, the cops have a massive budget, but they've never used it in recent memory effectively anyway. There's been so much irregularity with its application that's a topic in and of itself. But the stupid things like the SAPS air wing capacity, the last 4 serviceable helicopters in all of the Eastern Cape are now no longer serviceable. I think in the entire country there's a handful of serviceable aircraft in total that the SAPS has. So air wing capacity for practical intents and purposes does not exist. The Special Task Force have been hemorrhaging personnel to immigration and the private sector for years upon years. Their PCAM system, which is their evidence gathering and collating system, they failed to pay the service provider on that. So that system has been switched off since June last year. They've now gotten CETA to build their own thing, but it's not working. Its functionality is I can't say subpar. It's essentially non-functional. So there's 173,000 criminal cases and about 8 million pieces of outstanding forensic evidence that can't be linked. All those cases are compromised. So the entire justice system is essentially broken from that point of view. The firearm permit system that keeps track of 500,000 SAPS firearms is offline. So they don't know where their own guns are. They don't have ammunition half of the time. And a small town, well, not a small town, a reasonably sized town like Somerset West that has about 100,000 people staying there, has 2 SAPS vehicles to service, only 2, that entire town. Jeez. So if you're expecting a meaningful police response time, all the stuff is in the public domain. Police response times, if you can get under 30 minutes for an emergency, you're lucky. You're going to wait between 1 and 4 hours if they even pitch on, if you're lucky. The state cannot provide your security needs, your personal or community security needs, which is why the private security industry is one of the biggest per capita in the world, if not the biggest. This is why vigilantism is on the rise. This is why communities are taking more and more drastic and desperate measures to secure themselves, because the humongous vacuum that has been left by government law enforcement is that remarkable.
So I mean, sorry, Ricky. So I mean, security is just one part of a very big problem across all servicing from government. And the narrative about the tax revolt has been pretty common over the last few years. I mean, this question is pointed at both of you, I guess. I mean, what do you think is going to be the point of critical mass where a tax revolt actually happens? Because I think it's inevitable. But what's gonna happen? I mean, when are people going to realize that that's the only answer?
Yeah, go for it, Gideon.
Well, I don't actually have an exact answer of critical mass, but I think we're on the cusp of it. There's literally there has to be one case of a high-profile person saying, "I'm no longer paying tax. Come for me." And as soon as that figure is willing to step to the front, we'll probably see a lot of people rallying around it and say, "I'm also no longer paying tax." I think there's already a silent tax revolt of people either, not declaring their complete incomes or restructuring it to a huge degree, or doing, going to extreme lengths to hide what they earn from SARS already. We're not aware of it because no one's talking about it, because you don't want to draw attention to yourself if you're doing it, or at least that's how I'd imagine they would word it or think it. So I'm convinced that's already happening. And I think SARS's own ability to audit and to perform its functions is probably significantly eroded from where it was 10 years ago. So at some point, the tax man himself will no longer be able to even do his job. And I think as soon as SARS is crushed by its own ocean of paperwork and responsibilities, and the fact that it doesn't have sufficient competent personnel or leadership anymore, as soon as SARS's feet of clay gets it to topple, then it's over. Then then the government can forget about taxes from then on.
Yeah. I think Brandon, it's probably going to be something more similar along the lines of what happened to Queenstown and Harrismith and towns like that, where de facto they just implode, where the municipality has been so hollowed out by corruption and grift and maladministration that they are forced to sell their assets on open auction to pay their debts. That's what happened in Queenstown, and they sold everything. They even sold the speeding cameras. Like they sold the trash vans, the speed cops cars, the speeding cameras, everything gone. To a point where they're not collecting over 70% of rates and taxes anymore because they don't have the capacity from staff to be able to even write up invoices and go and track down the farmers who owe rates and taxes. So there you have, I mean, the effective tax rate of farmers around Queenstown is probably in single digits because people aren't collecting. But neither should they be paying taxes because they're providing all the services for themselves. So this is kind of where where do civic institutions step in, Gideon? And we've seen the rise of the likes of AfriForum and Sakeliga and Solidariteit step to the plate in this regard. And where do you think this leads?
Well, I think the question of especially AfriForum's do self, do it yourself, is a big part of it, because everyone wants to do it themselves. But a big thing is, although the ultimate end of that discussion is, I'm doing this myself, why am I still paying taxes?
Yeah.
And as you say, as things implode and people start having to do it for themselves, why would they part with their hard-earned money in possibly one of the biggest economic collapses in human history to feed a bloated state civil service that's striking for double-digit wage increases while the entire half of the country is unemployed?
Yeah. I mean, so let's just talk practically about what AfriForum is doing. So between them and Solidariteit, they built Soltech, which is their new tertiary institution. They've got a trade institution that's gone up as well. So they taking back tertiary education, but that's obviously the tip of the iceberg. Like before they got there, it started with filling potholes, right, and taking back community safety. And so what have they been doing behind the scenes to fill that void?
Well, I would like us to ask Ernst that question, but I think from what I can see from where AfriForum is going is and Sakeliga is a great example of it. Sakeliga is directly aimed at providing for the needs of the small and medium enterprises, which are probably the most neglected and also the most important sector of the economy. Government loves big corporations. Big corporations are easy to control. They're easy to intimidate and manipulate, and they're easy to extract patronage from. Whereas small and medium-sized entrepreneurs and businesses are much more resilient to state capture, and it's also staffed by a different type of person. And I apologize to the good CEOs and directors out there, but most corporate management are spineless jellyfish that couldn't stand up to a fresh gale, let alone a government minister. Sakeliga has provided and is providing, and I'm excited to see where Sakeliga is going to go with this, because I want to be a part of whatever they're doing. That would be a community. That's not just a digital community. That's also a physical community of cooperation, interaction, and mutual, what should I call it, need satisfaction. Then AfriForum has got the community safety initiatives. They've got initiatives with the farmers themselves to provide support, and they are taking hands with organizations like Sai.org, headed up by the formidable Dr. Theo de Jager, who is doing everything that I don't want to swear on your show, but that
swear all you like.
Go for it.
That the limp dick ballless fuckwits at Agri SA should be doing, But I mean, they're too busy sucking the government's balls to actually stand up for their members who are trying to farm productively under the most trying social, political, and economic circumstances since the Great Depression. So
with a bit of light civil war sprinkled on top of it.
exactly. So AfriForum and their, I'm not going to call it their affiliates because they are independent organizations that cooperate, well, that they cooperate with as in a symbiotic relationship. They're pretty much almost in every sphere of society, and they are building resilience. And I'm pretty sure, or at least I'd like to believe, that their organization's doing the same thing amongst like the rural black community as well. You can't expect this from the woke guys because they're too busy blogging and complaining on Instagram and Twitter. Yeah, they're too busy virtue signaling. They're not actually going to pursue solutions, which is their biggest weakness. If they put
if woke people put in the work, they wouldn't be woke, right?
Yeah, this is true.
Yeah, I mean, so on that point of these institutions, how do you see them being able to carry out their mandate from their members in an environment where the rand is continuously devaluing, and they'll most likely, if they come to loggerheads with the government, face financial repression?
Well, the only answer to that's private money. Whoop, sorry, there my entire thing nearly fell over. It's private money, and that is the beauty of Bitcoin. That's the beauty of the ease and velocity of payment problem that has now been solved is so vital. If all you do is transact in Bitcoin and you do not need to ever convert that digital asset into fiat currency, you are operating in a whole new world of possibilities where the government cannot actually stop you from doing what you are doing, even though they might despise you and actively are trying to get to shut you down. The banks can't touch you. FNB, ABSA, Nedbank, Standard Bank, they can't close your accounts. They can't discriminate against you. They can't not lend to you because you are not using their money. The commercial banks are a product of the fiat system. They cannot exist. They can exist without governments and central banks, but they don't want to.
You talked about spinelessness earlier, and that's where the banks will be. So those will be the guns for the government to stop and repress these kind of organizations and stop them getting their money. And that's where central bank digital currencies, that's their mandate. That's what those things will do. So the secret is to try and find a way to pay for services, staff, and all that in Bitcoin as well. But there will be ways that people can get fiat money if they need, and some people will because they need rands or dollars or whatever to pay for X and Y. And that's where there's these decentralized peer-to-peer exchanges that people could use. They get paid in Bitcoin from a civil organization or whatever, and then they can go without a bank change that Bitcoin to rand. But also there's awesome open source software coming out like BTC Pay Server and all that can facilitate the liquidity between rand and Bitcoin as well. So this is where we'll see the movement away from banks. They will become redundant over time, both in the central bank digital currencies on this side, becoming where the central bank is a credit provider solely, and then Bitcoin on the other side, and they're just going to get squashed in between, and the governments alongside them, I believe, as well.
And I think, Brandon, those are great points. I think the one thing that civic organizations like AfriForum need to possibly investigate with a bit of haste is how do they increase their financial clout? I mean, they've got currently, I think AfriForum's got like over 250,000 rate-paying members every month that are making contributions of 75 Rand or more towards AfriForum. If they allocate even a portion of that to Bitcoin and take a long-term view, let's say a 5 to 10 year view on it, their financial clout is going to increase significantly. And then that portion of their money that they keep in Bitcoin is outside of the ambit of government to even control it. Because if AfriForum keeps their money in a bank account, right? If they become persona non grata with the government just needs to apply pressure to whatever bank it is that is banking AfriForum, and they'll shut off their accounts. Like it's that simple. We can say yes, they'll take them to courts and etc. Dude, when they shut your account down, it's very difficult to pay your lawyers when all your money is locked up in an account. And then it means you're going to lose that case and you can't pay your lawyers. So having a war chest in Bitcoin is probably a prudent thing to do. Yeah, I mean,
it's not unrealistic for government to that level of tyrannical extreme intervene in the so-called commercial banking sector. I mean, look at some of the CEOs and chief operating officers of some of these banks that are former ANC politicians or connected individuals with Lutuli House. It's again, there is no true independence there. And from what Brandon said earlier, I think people might not understand the significance of peer-to-peer exchanging Bitcoin for either cash or digital bank money. You could reach a point where through an online peer-to-peer anonymous financial service, you could have an enforceable contract of lending money like Bitcoin to buy a fixed property like a house and be kept to the terms of that agreement by that digital contract that both parties, who may be entirely anonymous, you have absolutely no clue who's lending you the money. They have no idea who they're lending the money to, but the contract is enforced via a script that is not alterable, and neither party cares about who the other one is because they know that there is the debt obligation will be serviced, or there will be other consequences.
Yeah, or the contract will self-close, and the person's collateral will be transferred back to them. Yeah,
exactly. So the banks must be fucking terrified, because that is a whole brave new world of financial services provision that means that no regulations written on any statute book will be enforceable.
Yeah,
like it's yeah.
And I've got to hop on about, this is where people start talking about Ethereum and smart contracts without any intermediary between. And on certain conditions like these, you can pass money from party A to party B. And I just want to let people know that this is available right now on Bitcoin. There's development on the first chain, but in most use cases on the second chain, Lightning Network, and on even the third chain called RGB, there are smart contracts like these that upon conditions, money gets passed from A to B. So Bitcoin is already doing this. You can automate all these things without the need of government or lawyers or any of these people in between, on a certain predefined conditions. So that I'm very excited about that.
Absolutely, man. Like, that's gonna absolutely destroy the banks and destroy the lawyers. Something I look forward to.
This might be, we might be looking at the last few years in which people are paying home loans and bonds to banks, as we know it. And if the banks want to survive this, they better start adapting to change very quickly. But they won't, because they can't, because they're gigantic corporate entities, and to get them to change courses is harder than turning an oil tanker around. It's just
in the Suez Canal.
Yeah. By the time they've gotten onto what's going on, they're going to be 10 years behind the curve.
Yeah.
And that's going to be too late.
Yeah. Speaking of behind the curve, you've got experience with SOEs, having worked for a subsidiary of SAA.
That was a good segue, by the way.
Very good segue.
What is your
masterfully done, sir?
Your experience with SAA? I'm sure people are dying to know what's really happening at SAA.
It's a complete shit show. Now, SAA, I'm not 100% sure how broken they are, because I was not aware there are this many degrees of broken. A private sector entity would break and either be bought out and restructure completely, or it would close down and liquidate entirely. There's nothing left of it. It's just the vultures pecking at the carcass, which is not happening because government is keeping it on an IV line and life support artificially. It's the same with Mango. So Mango's now gotten an 800 or about to get an 850,000 odd rand cash injection.
Million, not thousand, right?
Sorry, 850 million. Yeah, it's been a long day. But their debt obligation, last I heard, to their creditors was in excess of 2.7 billion rand. Yep. Now, you guys are sharp financial minds. If you've got that debt obligation at a fairly competitive interest rate, Your interest alone after about a year is looking at what, 270 million? So the cash injection they're getting will cover the full interest for 1 year and erode the principal debt obligation for a little bit. But that's not going to, that's not even money that's available to restart operations, to keep financing operations, to be employed for the day-to-day running. This is literally just a cash injection to keep the wolves away from the door for a couple of more months, without even touching a significant portion of the complete total outstanding debt. So if you buy tickets on this airline, please don't come cry to me on Twitter if you're stranded again in some sort of terminal building because AXA or ATNS have again just sort of grounded them at the last minute with immediate effect for indefinite period of time. And this is not just an SAA Mango problem. I mean, you look at Denel. Denel Arms Corps, PMP Ammunition, Pretoria Metal Pressings, that's what it stands for. PMP is done. They were looking at a buyer, from what I was heard. A guy I know was actually, they were trying to sell PMP for something stupid like 8 million rand. This is an entire ammunition factory, okay, for 8 million. So the guy's like, this is a steal. He's going to go take a look. And he said he realizes why it's for sale for 8 million. Because firstly, you buy it with all its employees and their pensions without retrenching anybody. They have an archaic method of ammunition manufacturing that is super labor intensive. They did not automate or mechanize sufficiently. And they have a fuck ton of debt that you're going to buy that you have to service as well. So it's not a sellable product. This is, again, PMP manufactures the ammunition for the SANDF and for the SAPS. So and they have contracts. I don't know if our military or our police are allowed to procure ammunition outside of the state manufacturer. So we're probably going to start seeing significant ammo shortages with the cops, which is why they've already now said that there's no money or ammunition to make them do their qualification shoots every year. They'll only make them do them now every 5 years, which is shocking. That's something I left out. So Denel is in its mood and SAA is in its mood, and we can see Eskom is we're flirting with a total grid collapse like every two fucking weeks. It's scarier than I can put in my tone of voice. That's an existential threat. Waterworks and sewage treatment plants, that's a sad story. I mean, how long do you want to be here? How many more SOEs would you like? But it's a complete, it's not that they're at the point of collapse. They have actually already collapsed. And if it weren't for the government printing presses, and I don't know where they're getting money from, these things would just have ceased functioning altogether entirely. As opposed to this sort of facsimile of a functioning, or this pantomime of a functioning SOE.
So why then does the welfare state keep expanding? If everything is going to shit, how does it still keep growing?
Not organically. That's a fact. This is the thing that I don't have an answer for, and I was hoping one of you two could maybe shed light on it. But if the tax base is shrinking at a catastrophic rate, the total welfare recipients are increasing astronomically.
There's more welfare recipients than actively employed people in the country right now,
but by a scary proportion.
I think the answer is they print money, guys, but because also in America, even though productivity goes up, their corporate tax is basically close to zero. I mean, Amazon pays like no tax. Jeff Bezos pays no tax. So, and more people are becoming going through the inequality rates and so on. It's not as bad there as it is here, but all governments do is print money and they kick the can down the road.
But
and
what's
that's
the
how
point
they
of taxes
keep
then, Brandon? Why do we pay taxes if they can just print the money?
It's control. It's control. Yeah. It's a system and a set of controls that they need to put people in place. That's all it is.
Okay. Well, so essentially then it's government knows that if they print money, they're going to cause hyperinflation. So they know the only sustainable way to run a balanced budget is to have people to pay tax.
But no, they don't think they'll cause hyperinflation. That's the problem. They think like there's modern monetary theory and all these horrible things that come about, and they think CPI is at a standard rate, South Africa 4% or whatever, and America 2%. But it's not the reality. They tell themselves lies so many times until they believe it themselves.
Sniff their own farts.
Yeah, that's all they do.
So we know that Marxists don't understand economics. They believe in the labor theory of value.
Yeah.
They also don't understand money. And I think if the late great Friedman was still alive, he would tear what little of his hair remained out by now, just looking at global monetary policy in total. But the printing presses are on. And when everyone's printing presses on at this rate, you're not going to notice it in exchange rate fluctuations. But as you've also said, you are going to notice it in asset prices.
Yep.
But at some point, that asset price reversal is going to come, and inflation will. I mean, CPI in this country is a lie. CPI applies only to you if you live in a shack and you eat brown bread and lentils. If you ride the train, which you can't do anymore because all the tracks have been stolen. But if you are middle class or higher up the scale, your CPI is much higher.
Double digits.
Yeah, double digits.
Yeah, and on the other side, Gideon, you did economics, so you probably know more than me. And it's bonds, right? Bonds, it's a great way, it's a great measure of the system. And you're looking at those yields now in Western countries, basically on a real rate, negative real rate. And that's gone down from like 16, 80% in the 1980s, all the way down to 0.5% last year in America on the 10-year. And so they obviously need to implement yield curve control now because they have printed so much, and through basically all those treasuries out there with no one buying anymore, China and Russia aren't, they can't service their debt anymore, and because all these countries are like over 100% debt to GDP ratio now. So they obviously have to keep these yield rates lower because they can't service that debt, which means nobody's going to be buying bonds, which means they can't service the debt. And there's this horrible cyclical effect coming into place. And that's the other side. And as they keep printing more, it just only worsens that effect. So we're going to see some horror things. I don't know what. But that's why people with Bitcoin, they think like the $11 trillion gold market is the one to look at. No, it's the $186 trillion bond market. That's the baby that you're after. And it will go after that.
And an economist a famous one that I'll keep anonymous, sent me a message yesterday where he said, I battled to replace a 20-year-old bond of 3.5 million rand with a new one at 3 million. That's a 15% decline in bond price. It's an issue. It's starting.
Yeah. I mean, so nice segue here. How does Bitcoin fix this?
It's not government controlled. That's the key issue.
That's exactly it. But also it's going to be a slow effect, because if Bitcoin tried to fix the system now, the whole system would collapse into itself and it would cause a lot of pain. It needs to be slow and steady, and there will be a point of no return, and there will be a great reset, but not in the World Economic Forum's eyes and what they fucking see, but an actual real great reset where there's a lot of pain. And that's when you start looking at the upturn of movements towards like a money that has got some backing, going back towards a gold standard with a new digital form. And that's going to take some time in my eyes.
Yep. But I mean, so free people have got to use free money, right? If we are going to be a people that are free, in the classical sense of the word, we can't carry on with money that's controlled by an oligarchy of cantillionaires. We can't have the system where you've got those who position themselves closest to the money spigot being those who have the most power and essentially have proof of stake in the system. It doesn't work. And it just creates these perverse outcomes of, the massive inequality, because those who produce nothing but are positioned closest to the money spigot are the ones who end up getting the most influence and power. And that's, in my opinion, why the world is so fucked up right now. It's because you've got those people least qualified to be making decisions for everyone. And Bitcoin is basically a reset to all of this, because it's all based on work. It's proof of work. You've got to pay to play, man. Energy has got to be consumed honestly. Risk has got to be taken. And this is how you bootstrap a new currency into existence, without asking anyone's permission, without getting government's blessing. And those individuals, businesses and institutions, and eventually governments that embrace that, the earlier you embrace that, the more you stand to gain, right? And this is really where sovereign individuals who want to, who can see what's coming, on their horizon, like how do you protect yourself against that? Like, you get some skills, you figure out how to defend yourself and your family, and how to organize your community, and build strong communities. And then you back that up with, how do you actually preserve your wealth in the trying times that are coming? Because I don't think any one of us sitting here right now can actually appreciate how bad things are probably going to get before they get better.
Yeah. I would like to say I'd prefer if we skip the breakup of Yugoslavia bad, because that would be extremely bad. But I think the thing that
unless we Slovenia in that little equation.
Exactly. Look, the positive thing is there's no trained, adequately equipped, strong, big state-controlled military force that can actually oppress 60 million people. So, I mean, there's that. And I think staying in the Western Cape is a really good start to being resilient and state-proofed, because there is still there is an element of extreme independence here. And I hope that grows and flourishes a bit more. But people just need to get their heads out of their rectums, and quickly.
Yep. So, I mean, what practical advice would you give to anyone right now if you could grab a Karen by the shoulders and wake her up and be like, here's 3 things you got to do, Karen?
I'd say here's a couple of things. Okay, COVID protocols aside. Okay, buy Bitcoin, Karen. Okay, do that thing. Get your proficiency training done. Get a gun, get ammunition, know how to use it, know how to defend yourself. Learn how to defend yourself beyond the gun. The tool is important, but understand personal security, personal safety, to look after yourself and your family. Then look at other elements of resilience. Okay, see if you can get yourself off grid, or at least less dependent on the grid. See and that applies to water as much as electricity. It applies to growing your own food. Not necessarily so that you can live out of your garden, but that you at least have that option if you need to exercise it. And the most important aspect of all of these things, change your mindset. Have a paradigm shift and start taking personal responsibility for as many aspects of your life. That's your economic well-being, that's your personal safety and security. Think of an aspect or factor. Take responsibility for those things, and that's the place to start.
Absolutely. And one last thing is personal relationships, right? So what we've noticed in 2020 obviously is everyone decentralizing the workforce and working remotely, and that's it. And COVID mask protocols and social distancing is pushing people away from each other, man. And like, no man is an island. You rely on your neighbor and your community, and you need to have those strong relationships, because you don't know how to fix your car necessarily, but the guy down the road might. He might not know how to grow, food, but you might. And these are extreme things to think about, but you'd rather know how to, like a gun, rather have it and never have to use it than not.
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's also why you've got insurance policies. You don't want your house to burn down. In fact, you hope it never, ever does, but you want that in case something like that happens to you.
Yeah, absolutely. That's also why you self-custody your Bitcoin. You don't want to have accumulated a couple of million rand of Bitcoin on an exchange, and next minute the government goes to the exchange and says, all right, guys, game over, shut those accounts down. We don't like this Bitcoin thing. And then all of your wealth means nothing. So self-custody is super important. Brandon, any closing thoughts from you?
No, nothing else. I think it was a great chat. Thanks so much for your time, Gideon.
Thank you so much, guys. It was awesome. I hope to come on again soon because I really like the content and the discussions. And I'm going to send more people in your direction because everyone wants to know about Bitcoin. And I think you guys are the best people to tell them about it.
Well, you'll be pleased to know we just got our referral codes in place. So we'll be getting you one of those so you can earn Bitcoin off of all your people you send to us.
Awesome. Totally doing it.
Brilliant. Gideon, thank you so much for your time. And I'll be seeing you on the range soon.
Absolutely, gents. Thank you.
Cheers, guys.
Have a good evening, guys. Cheers. Bye.
Bye.